Robert, could you do roll call, please?
Mayor DeGoya is absent. Vice Mayor Lewis,
Here.
Chair Polito,
Here.
Vice Chair Massey,
Here.
Mr. Anthoven, or Mr. Lee.
Here.
Santon's absent.
Okay, public comment. Anybody have anything they'd like to bring up?
Well, maybe this is the time to do it. Did any of you experience the traffic light problem?
At Menlo School, Menlo College.
It was amazing how much that caused traffic to back up all the way down to the shopping center. And I was surprised that the next morning it was still blinking.
I think it had to do with the power outage. There had been a big rig that snagged the power pole at Park and Emily, and it took the power out for about 1,700 residents, and I think somehow that light was affected adversely. So.
I see. I mean, I was just wondering if that's in the jurisdiction of Atherton, I suppose.
Yes, yeah, Menlo Park, Atherton, but it was Menlo Park residents as well as Atherton residents that were affected by that, so, yeah.
It's light on the El Camino.
Yeah. It's terrible. I was just
know.
wondering if this was Atherton's responsibility, whether we couldn't have gotten somebody out there sooner.
It's not Atherton's responsibility along the El Camino, the stoplights, no,
Caltrans.
and the electricity,
Is it Caltrans?
Mhm.
So.
PG&E,
Since
Caltrans.
we're making comments, I want to compliment the Atherton Police and the Burlington Police Department for the job they did on the traffic enforcement down El Camino, particularly right almost in front of my house. I mean, there were 80-some tickets written for texting, you know, people not stopping for pedestrians. Actually, some fool actually got stopped by the cops. They came up to his car and he told them to pretty much F off, and he took off. I mean, you know.
Yeah,
But they had like 80 citations, something like that, in
that's
in
very good.
7-hour period. It was really, so it goes to show you what's going on out there. I mean,
Mhm.
the speeding, the texting, the cell phone, it was,
Cell phone in the hand with a speaker. I
oh
read
yeah,
about that.
oh yeah, it was all of that from what I read on the paper, so they should be, they should be commended for doing that. It was a great.
They did a good job.
But I've seen I think in Redwood City and in Menlo Park, these crossings where somebody can press a button and little lights
Mm-hmm.
blink. It would help. I mean, I drive along that stretch. It's very hard to see. It would help if there was some way that the pedestrian could signal their
Well,
presence.
and so that's the type of question that we should be bringing up at our forum on Monday the 16th between
Okay.
6 and 8 p.m. at Jenny's Pavilion.
The ideal one is on Ravenswood down by the library in Menlo Park.
Yeah, they've got one of those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I go through there 4 times a day.
Right, and that's a smaller, narrower roadway.
Yeah.
Caltrans will not put those in-ground flashing pedestrian lights along El Camino because it's a 6-lane highway. And so from the town's perspective, we're looking at a pedestrian activated, it's called a hybrid beacon, and it will be, it's an arm with this little triangle, two lights, red and one yellow. When the pedestrian activates it, it's yellow, 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 then red, 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 and you stop. And it's a hybrid beacon, and so we have 2 installations planned, one on Alejandra intersection and one at Isabella intersection.
And I'm gonna talk about that on the 16th because that's not the real issue on El Camino.
Okay,
The real issue is the foot traffic, bike traffic,
along the
up El
sides.
Camino. 24 hours a day, there's somebody there. I mean, I actually saw a guy in a motorized wheelchair.
Yeah. So,
going
so
from Atherton Avenue
So I think we
up by
should
my
kind of
house
put a
in
pin
Lloyd.
in this discussion and bring it up at the,
Yeah, I
because
will.
that's exactly why this, you
Yeah,
know.
it's not the crossing, it's, there's no room for these people. There are people walking, biking,
Yeah.
guys in wheelchairs, homeless people pushing recycle. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I
But
know.
we're getting a little far afield from finance.
Well, somebody's gotta pay for this.
We got passion behind this, Robert.
I see you're getting a flashing light at your cross street. I knew that you had clouds, I have one thing I would like,
I've had to recuse myself, no, I haven't.
I have one thing I'd like to bring up. I was out of town last week and got involved via email about the town of Atherton potentially bidding on a contract for our countywide waste authority. And it involved exchanges with Elizabeth and with Mr. Widmer and Robert and ultimately George. And I have one question. I don't want to bother this group with the details, but since that was purely a finance department issue, to me at least, why wasn't that brought to this committee to vet before we bothered the city council with the details?
It's operations, not investments and budget and things like that. It's more of an operational decision with respect to how we handle our finance department and staff.
I would think anytime the town's gonna start performing services for anybody but the town, that topic should be.
Oh, this was for somebody else.
Exactly.
We provide services to other communities all the time. Sometimes it costs. We provide services to Redwood City, to Menlo Park, to East Palo Alto via our police department. It's an operational decision how we share our K-9 officers, how we share our school resource officer. Those are services that we provide external to the town. They don't come before the finance committee, they're operational decisions.
And then somebody else provides services to us, the
Yeah.
exchange.
Sometimes,
This is kind of a courtesy thing we do and they do for us?
not always. Sometimes it's per contract, sometimes they pay us for that service.
Really?
Well, the police sharing is kind of a,
Not always though.
but it's like an on-call kind of a thing. If there's an emergency, like we deployed officers in the San Bruno disaster.
Yep. We do
Or
that.
if there's a large protest march or something that they need additional officers for. So,
We do that.
And
Those
then-
are the on-call ones, those are
Right.
the mutual aid kind of service
mutual
calls.
aid, right,
But we
that's the
also
term.
provide, like Burlingame provided officers here under an Office of Transportation Traffic Safety Grant. We provided officers under a grant opportunity for other agencies and we get paid for that. We provided officers to go into Oakland for the riots that were going on there recently.
Yeah,
Well,
but this,
I understand
I've heard a
it's
bunch of
contract
police-centric
issues.
things, but this is far from that and doesn't appear to have any precedent, so
Yeah, it doesn't, you're right, but
I just think maybe it could have been brought here and could have got some input from this group and before you bothered our important council members with it.
And I think also time was of the essence too, because we have till the end of March to.
That's exactly what I thought he was gonna say, but that's not what he said.
No,
I figured
and
time was of the essence. And I would have thought that we could have even had an emergency meeting maybe if time was of the essence, but
Yeah,
it sounds like George is saying,
it's
operationally, I'll do
operational.
whatever I wanna do, kind of
I
thing.
think it's more of a policy decision, you know, rather than
By the
the,
council.
yeah, and I think that's what it was brought to the council as a policy decision, so, to,
All right.
go in the business of that.
Let's move on to our approval of the draft minutes for the February meeting. I read them through, a few typos and minor issues, but I thought the content was accurate. Anybody,
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The agenda talks about the November 20th, and I was puzzled as to why that, because we.
That's the last meeting agenda.
Oh, that's the minutes of the last meeting agenda, how we, what we approved. I'm sorry.
I should notice that.
Okay, so now we move into the CalPERS reports, which, you know, it's just grade school math. It should only take 5 minutes to discuss this simple topic.
It's all adding and subtracting,
Robert,
right?
why don't you lead us into this?
Thank you, Chair. Right before, what you have before you is an additional, it's a continuation from what we handed out last Finance Committee meeting. We handed out the information regarding our CalPERS actuarial reports as of June 30th, 2013. So today we're going to review and discuss those actuarial reports and then provide future analysis for City Council review for consideration. So as you're all aware, in 2013, CalPERS announced that there would be new amortization and smoothing policies, and they would begin in the fiscal year 15-16. These smoothing policies are included in these recent actuarial reports. The new policy considers gains and losses on agency plans and amortizes them over a fixed 30-year period. So beginning in 15-16, this 5-year rate smoothing implementation policy will pay for gains and losses, as mentioned, over the 30-year period. The employee rates are expected to gradually increase starting this 15-16 fiscal year through 19-20. And the assumption is that this assumed investment rate will be at 7.5% per year. Just to mention, in 13-14, CalPERS had an investment return of 18.42%, and which is included in the actuarial reports for the fiscal year ending 2014. New to these reports also is an analysis of investment scenarios should CalPERS not receive the 7.5% return. I know in previous meetings we've discussed doing our own analysis on what would happen if investment rate returns do not come in as what CalPERS predicts. So we wanted to do a sensitivity analysis as well and maybe engaging outside consultants. But the need for doing that is moved because now CalPERS is realizing we need these tools and is now providing these tools for us on investment rate return, discount rate sensitivity analysis. So with that said, there's a couple things that we want to discuss here. One is the investment smoothing policy that took place. Now the value of assets is based off the market value of assets. And 3, the risk analysis tools that are provided for us. So those things will come in and bring us and culminate the discussion in how we anticipate in helping fund these alternatives. And at the end of the staff report, I had a couple of items of how we would do this, as far as we would consider to provide an analysis to the council and paying down our liabilities. One would be continued use of ERAF to pay down long-term liabilities. The other was potential use of unallocated general fund reserves to fund our liabilities. The other one was consideration of maybe applying a payment towards lowering our net normal costs. Again, the other one was maybe accumulate some reserves and then maybe make a one-time payment towards CalPERS to pay down our liabilities. And another one was maybe, would include maybe an analysis of the parcel tax and maybe looking at how we have that allocation. And the other one was maybe setting a funding target and how much we want to fund towards the CalPERS unfunded liability. As you recall, with the OPEB portion, the town has made some contributions to our OPEB actuarials, to our trust. We have about $4.4 million in the trust. We will probably, by the end of the fiscal year, make another appropriation to make it up to $5 million. So we made headway on the OPEB trust component. So we're probably just trying to see coming up with an analysis for these CalPERS unfunded liability, which is the other portion of our long-term liabilities. So with that said, I kind of put together a spreadsheet of kind of where we've been going forward, trying to kind of get this discussion going. Yes.
I would think added to that would be consideration of going to a 20 or 25-year amortization period, of which there are some numbers provided by CalPERS in that regard.
Yes, and we'll go through the actuarial reports as to answer the questions and go forward to create a discussion component of it. So
Can I just ask
yes.
a question to the chair? Just in your staff report, the graphs, the new rates for both the public safety and the town miscellaneous. So it shows the 15-16 rate as 1%, and then it looks like they've just increased it and it's flat for the next 5 years. Is that an actual, is that a realistic
No,
projection?
and I think eventually those rates will go up. I think what CalPERS does is they give us 2 years. They give us the year that we're gonna enter, they give us the actual what that rate's gonna be. And then the second year, they give us a projection. And the projection, they put a disclaimer that this is gonna change when they do the next year's actuarial. But this is just for us to maybe analyze and kind of plan for planning purposes. Okay, this is what they project that following year's rates will be. So as you can see, yes, the 9.2, it stays constant going forward, but that will change in the next year's actuarial reports. It's supposed to increase 1.1% every year.
1.1 percentage points.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so, I mean,
That's
shouldn't we?
only on the unfunded portion, not on the normal cost.
No, that's the ramp up portion of going forward, the normal cost. It's the 1.1 percentage point plus whatever the new actuarial, every year the actuarial will take in consideration gains and losses. And so the normal cost could go up more than that 1.1% because of their analysis.
Right, the normal cost could, but the ramp up you're talking about applies only to the unfunded liability, not to the normal cost.
The ramp up is of our employer cost, goes up 1.1 percentage points each year. So if our employer rate is 8.8% this fiscal year, next fiscal year is gonna be
Really, it's built into the
9.9%,
normal?
10 point, yeah.
Every single graph and everything I've looked at, it appears to be talking about eliminating the unfunded portion.
Yes.
It is. But the unfunded portion now is gonna be a dollar amount. It's not gonna be an actual percentage. If on the staff report.
I know that, but,
Okay.
well, you've thoroughly confused me now. Go ahead.
Well, like on the amortization, okay, for instance, on the 15-16 the new contribution rate for miscellaneous employees, it's 8.84% is, and that's on the page 2 of the
Our
staff
new
report.
rate, right.
Right. So that's the normal cost rate. Okay, and then what would actually be, it would be with this ramp up, it's this 8.84%, which is the normal cost, and then if you take into consideration this UAL of 120,000, well, that percent is 8.057%. So the normal cost would actually be 16%. I mean, the total cost would be 16%
Right.
if you're including the unfunded liability.
Right.
Because they want to get away from that, because the reason why they want to get away from that is they want to actually get it funded quicker through paying the unallocated portion as an amount. So that's the ramp up. They want to pay it quicker and not through a percentage of payroll. So if you do it as a percentage of payroll, it would be, they're realizing that it's not capturing it because payrolls fluctuate. So the reason why because they're fluctuating, they realize the unfunded liability will never get recaptured correctly or in a correct way where they want it to be paid off. It will always be, if it's basically, if it's 16%, the following year it can adjust to 20%.
I hear all that, but if you turn to page 18 of the miscellaneous plan for the town of Atherton, you'll see that the contribution for the unfunded liability goes up every year, whereas there's, as it was pointed out, they're showing it flat for the normal cost.
Right, but the UAL will go up.
Right, and
So he's asking if the 1.1 percentage point applies only to the UAL, or if it applies to the base rate?
I believe it applies only to the UAL, and it's reflected in dollar terms here.
But on the UAL, it's both.
I know the normal cost can change based on what happens with the investments. I understand that. That'll be recalculated every year. But the ramp-up period they're talking about, I believe, is expressed in those that dollar row there, and it includes the 1.1% per year for 5 years.
Yes, but it's not technically 1.1%, just on the UIL.
Well, again, the UAL portion will change also
Yeah.
based on what the investments do.
Because if it's, the change is actually, it's actually about 19%.
Yeah,
No,
that doesn't work.
I understand that the difference between 144, for example, and 120 is now
Mhm.
1.1%.
Yeah, right.
But I believe the ramp up that you're talking about, that it is in that number, along with whatever else is in that number.
So that's 16%?
It's in both.
So-
It's in the normal cost
Okay.
and the UAL.
It's not even this.
Well, remember, it's 1.1% of the total unfunded liability, so it's 1.1% of a big number, like,
Oh,
for miscellaneous employees, it's 1.1%
right, it's
of
not 1.1%.
$2.7 million,
Right, okay,
and for safety of $7.2 million. So, that's all right.
okay,
Let's
keep going.
go ahead, let's go ahead with what you gave us here, and we'll get to the bottom of this.
Bob, can I ask you a question? Robert, since we've done a fairly good job of paying down our unfunded liability vis-a-vis cities who have not,
Right.
are those cities getting an individual, are they gonna have the same rate?
Yes. Not the same
No.
rate as us. They'll have the same, their rate is predicated on their payroll, on how many people are in that
Yeah,
plan.
but I mean, to catch up on the unfunded liabilities. So what I'm saying is,
They
a
would
city,
have to
let's
have a
pick
higher,
one, Woodside, I don't think it has as much funding as we do. Is their rate contribution going to have to be higher than ours to catch up? Or in effect, are we gonna be help carrying them again?
No, theirs is based off of their payroll, and it's going to be whatever their unfunded portion could be higher than ours because their payroll could be less. And the reason why they're doing this ramp up is they realize payroll is shrinking. Payroll in CalPERS agencies is shrinking. So what's happening
That's
is,
a good thing.
as the pay, it's a good thing for operational costs, but on the pension side, your normal cost is for who's ever in the system at that time, right? But what about those that were in the system prior year? Those costs are now, they're still there. And so the unfunded liability as an amount being funded faster is a reason for this rate smoothing, because if not, the rates would go a lot higher.
My concern is our little town paying a disproportionate
No.
share
No, if you go to
to help
page,
fund these other cities?
They're not.
I don't
Okay,
believe
so I
so.
wanted to know.
No, because of
If
the.
you go to page 11,
Okay.
again, of the miscellaneous employee thing,
Right.
it shows how the calculations are done,
Okay.
and if you have a side fund that you haven't paid off, for example, your payments are gonna be higher, but our payments are not, because we do not have a side fund.
Right, we paid this
And
off.
everything is done as a ratio of your liability versus the assets you have. It's done in ratios, so
Okay.
if somebody's got a very low unpaid liability, remaining liability, they're gonna have a very low payment. And if they have a very high one, like that one thing, I forget which town it was, they're gonna have a very high payment, but shouldn't affect ours.
Yeah.
So Robert, just to take on your Woodside example, so they're having a challenge because their current employees are being asked to pay a disproportionate share of the CalPERS payouts to the prior employees. But it doesn't affect us, but
Right,
we have that same issue for ourselves based on the people we have.
in our system, that were in our
For
system.
instance, and we already fixed, and you guys, we already fixed this. Well, there's things that we've done in the past.
Yeah, we don't have it as bad.
Yeah,
Right,
just want to understand.
right.
But the unfunded liability,
Mhm.
which this does affect, as I understand it, there's there's a rather lengthy slide presentation on the CalPERS site that I went through. If you try and, the old so-called smoothing thing was a different mechanism, but if you take a percentage of today's payroll to pay off all those obligations when the payrolls were much bigger and when we had a lot of people, you'll never catch up.
Right.
That's why they've changed it to dollars on the unfunded side.
Got it.
But as I understand it, on the normal cost, where you're paying for what today's employees have earned, are earning this year, I think it's covered. It's in that number, whatever the number they give us, even though it's based on 2-year.
Right, and that nominal cost will change because of how, the demographics, like one, mortality, that's gonna change. That normal cost could go up because now they're gonna say the expectancy now is
Right.
higher.
Correct.
What could change also is the investment of the portfolio. The biggest carrier, the biggest driver is the investment return on the liability.
Right.
So the reason why too that these unfunded liabilities are where they're at is because there was the losses. And so they're trying to ramp up in the losses that they had in 2008. Back in that time, the plan was 182 billion for CalPERS in 2008. It went to 182 billion. Now it's over 300 billion. It's like 305 billion. So they've made headway as far as the investment return. But what they lost, they recaptured. Now they gotta keep up with where they should be at this time,
Yeah.
which where they lost.
So bringing it back to like our specific situation and our employees, how many employees do we have that we expect to retire this year or in 2 years or in 5 years? And, how will that affect this? And then how many employees do we have? Because that are paying into this now.
Well, I think the amount of employees we have currently is about 36 people. The amount that would probably retire, probably within this next 5 years, maybe 2. And I'm saying maybe 1 in PD and 1 in employee miscellaneous. As far as them retiring, what's been put in, they paid their component while they were working here as far as into the PERS. I don't know if we remember, at one point we had the employer contribution and the employee contribution.
Right.
Well, now the employees have taken on the employee
Their share.
portion of the contribution. So they're paying that component. What we're just responsible for is the employer contribution. That will get figured in when they retire on our roll for what's our projected payroll and who's actually retired. They'll recalculate that. CalPERS will recalculate that every year. Every time that they monitor our payroll, when it shrinks, they see that and they input it into the reports, and so they project what our payroll would be. We're not at a disadvantage. I mean, we kind of, because we're smaller. If everybody retires, we'll probably feel it in the rate because now the payroll has decreased. The bigger cities, they don't feel it as much because they have huge payrolls. But where they do feel it is on the unfunded portion, what they've contributed and what has been lost through the system.
Okay.
CalPERS has said that 7.5% is their rate that they project in these reports. In 2011, beginning in 2011, 2012, it was at 7.75, and they adjusted it down to 7.5. There was discussion that maybe it would go down to 7.2, but they haven't done that because they feel that 7.5 is probably a conservative approach. And also what they did do in these assumptions is they changed moderately the asset allocation plan as well going forward. And that's what they monitored because they want to get, they feel that they're going to get the 7.5% rate of return. They looked at their asset allocation. and so they modified it moderately. It's just so it won't be as volatile.
So pertinent to Elizabeth's question about headcount, on page 21, it shows that on the miscellaneous employees as of June 30th, 2013, there were 19 active. Is that right? Do we have that many?
On miscellaneous, yes, because on PD, active,
I know PD's more than that,
right,
but I didn't think we had 19 full-time employees left. I guess we do.
In 2013,
Yeah, the end of
out of
2013.
2013, we did,
We'd already
We'd already
done that.
transferred
No,
a
you
lot
number
amount.
transfer.
I mean, I didn't look at the
So
org
that's-
chart and count them
yeah.
up, but that seemed like a lot to me.
Let's see, I can go through it now here.
In
The
2013.
CSO, code enforcement officer, that was a contract.
yeah.
So we got, the lieutenant, he's local, he's,
Yeah,
No, you're in
there's
the,
certain
you're in the
ones-
police. I'm saying it says the miscellaneous.
There's a couple of
Miscellaneous
people in
stuff.
police that
That
are
are-
on the miscellaneous
yeah.
plan.
yeah, so
They're
there's
not
not
the
the
chief and
lieutenant, so it's
lieutenant.
public works superintendent, let's see,
Well-
engineer,
Oh, yeah.
accountant, Teresa, Jennifer Frew, 5, myself, 6, Judy Heron at the front desk, 7,
And I believe
Robert, eight.
dispatchers are considered
Noy,
miscellaneous as well.
9,
Oh, and there's a lot of part-time dispatchers.
yeah. 10, and so there's like 10 plus the dispatchers and the part-time dispatchers who may have been involved. So
It's just
it
nice.
could
So-
be, yeah.
Yeah,
But that would not be that they're all full-time.
But, but
It's
they're
just
all PERS enrollees,
all personal, yeah.
based on their hours,
So 10 pretty much full-time and then the dispatchers.
10 to 12, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It's changed since then because we have the arborist now and the code
And the
enforcement
Going up,
officer,
yeah.
It's
CSO.
going up, right?
Just those two, yeah.
yeah.
And then we'll add one more.
For the SBWMA one you talk about, no, it's less than 20, so less than 20 hours a week, they don't get enrolled in CalPERS.
We don't have that contract.
No,
Right.
no,
Nor
but
do we have
if
contract.
it
That's
is.
correct.
Nor can I figure out
Yeah,
how we will get it.
Yeah.
So like, on page 7 kind of shows you the required employee contribution for miscellaneous. It shows you, the 14-15, it shows our rate. If you want to look at our rates, it's at, if you take that 7.824% plus the 0.088%, and
Where are we now?
on page 7.
Okay, miscellaneous?
Right.
Mhm.
So if you see those rates, the 7.824, currently the plan's payment on amortization basis is 3.2%.
Yeah.
And then you see the PRSA is 0.808%. Well, the total payroll percentage, employee required contribution that we're paying is 11.84%. So every payroll, we pay 11.84%. And that's our employer contribution, required contribution. If you look at fiscal year 15-16, there's a different component now. You see how the plan's payment on amortization basis is that 120,606
Yeah.
at the top. Okay, that's the unfunded, the UIL. So the UIL, if we go down and look at the payment, at the percentages, the UIL is the 8.057%. What we're gonna pay going forward is only 8.844%. So our employer contribution went from 11.84% in 14-15 to 8.84%. But because
Plus
now
120 grand.
right, it's going down, so you'll have some normal costs, the rate that we're required to pay through payroll, it's going down about 3.3%. But now we have this amortization of the UAL, which is 120,000. So it kind of shows you what it would be. So if we didn't do this lump sum amount payment, our rates would go from 11.84% to 16.9%. That's a cost in payroll. But because
They
now
still-
the UAL is going to be a payment, an invoiced amount that we will get invoiced, we're only going to pay 8.4% in operational cost, and then we're going to pay the 120,000.
That's on a monthly basis.
That's the year, that's for the whole.
That's what year.
That's a good
So
question,
monthly
though.
basis
Are you
would
gonna
be-
pay it operationally at the rate of 10,000 a month, or are you gonna pay it in a lump sum, or how
We
do you-
pay the lump sum, we save about $4,000.
Yeah,
We'll save money, we'll pay the lump sum. But that's the process where we're here today is, we're gonna have the UAL payment to pay, and that will be put into the new budget. And it's reflective here in the spreadsheet, but when we go forward, what we wanna realize is, okay, are we gonna just pay the UAL every year, just whatever they're saying that we pay? Or are we gonna pay that and then set aside an amount, either accumulate a reserve to pay off the UAL quicker? Again, the UAL is based off of 30-year amortization, so this 120,000, it's gonna change, as you can see in the schedules, it's gonna change, increases every year, by a certain amount. But right now, it's 120,000, next year it's about 144,000. UAL would be in 16, 17, it'd be 144,000. So that will increase over an amount of 30 years. So one is we'll pay the UAL every year that we're required to pay. At the same time, are we gonna come up with a strategy to maybe set aside an amount to pay above the
Are you
UAL?
guys seeking opinion on that or not? Or is it just an open question?
it's an open question.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
for
I like to
discussion.
address it because as I've said in these meetings before, you see all this money going for pension plans and UALs and all this stuff, and I don't see it going for park improvements, I don't see it on roads and streets, I don't see it on drainage.
Mm.
It's just like we come to these meetings and we figure out how we're gonna shove more money into the unfunded situations. And we're not taking care of the needs of the residents in this town. That's my continued take on that. I'm not saying we don't find another way to do it,
Right.
but until we address what I consider the situations I just described, then I think we take a back seat on doing any additional funding into this. Because I think we've been more than generous to these funds. And I think that was a thrust of the direction to the council from this committee last year.
And,
Well, Jim,
and
I would-
just,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I wouldn't call it generosity.
No,
I mean,
we're paying.
It's an obligation.
Relative to our other cities, we have been more than generous, Bob. Relative to what you see in the state on this unfunded pension liability, we are way ahead of the power curve. And maybe generous is not the right word,
Generous.
but we are being prudent and trying to meet our obligations, which is, but we also owe the citizens of this town.
So I just want to respond, and I think that you were absolutely right, Jim, and I'm so glad that you made those statements and were vocal about it. And the council did hear you in my perspective, and we have allocated this last budget year a lot more money for park maintenance, for park improvements, and I've had we're getting ready for the Easter egg hunt again, and so some of the committee members had just gone over there. They, wow, the park looks great. I haven't seen it look so much better. So I'm hoping that you can feel validated that we are spending more money in the park, and the drainage. We've got this drainage master plan that we've been working on. So those capital.
75,000 last council meeting.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
So it's having an effect.
So,
I'm not saying we don't pay
Okay.
the liabilities, I'm just saying
Right.
to start to
but you're
throw
right.
more extra at it until we take care of these other situations. I don't
So-
see this as a viable.
No, and I understand.
And you asked the question, so I just,
It is good.
Right. And that's the reason for the putting together the spreadsheet, to kind of show you where we've been in the past couple of years as far as what the town has paid in employer contributions. So if you look at fiscal year 11-12, there's the actual, there's miscellaneous and public safety. So the total employer contribution in fiscal year 11-12 on the spreadsheet is we've contributed $916,849 in fiscal year 11-12. Also in that year, there was a PD side fund that the council chose to pay off, and that was $1.2 million. So the total CalPERS employer contribution that we contributed that year was $2.1 million. So if you look at fiscal year 12-13, the actual amount of the total employer contribution was $792,000. Of that amount, $117,000 and some change was for miscellaneous. Public safety was $640,000. highlighted, there was the miscellaneous side fund payment also that was out there. The council also took into consideration that. We paid $647,000 off, paid that side fund off. So that year we contributed $1.3 million in employer contributions. Okay, and on those side funds, they used general fund reserves to pay off those side funds. Okay, so we moved into fiscal year 13-14. As you can see, the rates went down when we paid down those side funds. You see, if you look at 11-12, PD rate was 38.85%. When we paid off that side fund, it dropped to 26.42%. And similar with when we paid in fiscal year 12-13, we paid the side fund of $647,000. The miscellaneous rate went from 13.93% to 11.1%. So in 13-14, we paid $744,000 in employer rate contributions. So as you can see in the bottom of that, as the increase year over year, from 12-13, we netted a savings of $770,000 because we paid 2.1 in fiscal year 11-12. In fiscal year 12-13, it went to 1.3 million. So there was a $770,000 decrease year over year. From 13-14, there was a $626,000 decrease from year over year because we paid off that side fund. So going forward, fiscal year 14-15, this is the budget. We budgeted $913,000 is going to be our PERS contribution, employer contribution. So that's an increase of $168,000 from $744 in fiscal year 13-14 to the budget of 14-15 of $913,000. That's our employer contribution. Okay, so now here, past this blue line, the reason the blue line is there is now we're embarking on this CalPERS smoothing policy, right? Now that based on our rates this is a projected rate of projected cost of fiscal year 15-16. So we have that miscellaneous rate of 8.84% and the PD rate of 20.23%. Those are the normal costs. So that projects to be $641,000. Now below that, you'll see the $120,606. That's the miscellaneous UAL. That's part of this report, and then the $337,907 of the PD UAL. So if you add those two amounts up to the $641,000, so we're going to have a total CalPERS ER contribution of $1,099,000. So what's that a change based off of what we budgeted this year? It's an additional $186,000 in the ER contribution, just so you can see how this new smoothing rate, how it affects us operationally. So it's an additional $186,000 this year. If we take year 2, and investments assumed to be at the 7.5%, we won't know until next year's actuarials come out. But if we take it, it's the same rate, and then there's that miscellaneous rate of 9.2, normal cost, PD rate of 21.3. Our projected fiscal year 16-17 ER contribution at the normal cost would be $796,000. Then you add in what they estimate next year would be our UAL for miscellaneous at $144,539, and the PD UAL of $403,279. It brings us to a total contribution of $1.3 million. So that's a change of $245,000 increase in operational expense, just on paying based off of what this UAL component is now on the smoothing policy.
If the investment return was say 12%, would that reduce?
Yes.
Yes, it will, and that's why the 16-17 is just a projection.
Right, got it.
You know, next year's when the actuarial comes out this fall for the fiscal year 14, it could come in lower. I mean, they did make an 18.4% investment return on that. So that could go down.
So that 18.4% return, was that factored into our 14-15 numbers here?
Yes.
Or is that possibly going to make that go down a little bit?
It was factored into the component for the 16-17 fiscal year. It was factored in coming into this year, but the actual savings won't happen until the following fiscal year, which would be the 16-17.
The actuarials are always behind.
Yeah, they're 2
Okay,
years behind.
So just, year 2 assumes a 7.5.
Mhm.
Year 1 they factored in the 18.4% investment return.
They did, but
And our numbers were still this high.
Right, it won't reflect in the rates, and that investment return for 13-14 was assumed in calculating these rates, but the benefit of those won't happen until the 16-17 fiscal year, because it's always 2 years behind.
Okay.
The
But
actuarial is as of June of 30th, 2013,
Uh-huh.
and with those investment returns, they project 2 years out.
Right.
So they're using returns as of June 2013 to project 16-17. Or is it 15-16? 15-16.
Okay, so,
Yeah, but I think the 18% was for the 2014 year.
So it's a year after that.
So I think what they're doing is they're using the 18% and assuming 7.5% subsequent.
for year 1 and 2?
Yes,
For
So
year
it's-
1 and 2,
I believe so, the way I read it,
okay,
So it's a known investment return, but it's not paper yet.
yeah.
okay. So those no, because it just, even with us paying down and paying in, you know, our annual increase just keeps getting bigger. I mean,
Yeah.
it just.
And it's on page 18. Page 18 kind of is part of the risk analysis that we're talking about. Page 18 of the actuarial reports kind of shows you the projected employer contributions. You know, and that's where that 8.84% and it's 19% and it stays static. Well, this investment return scenarios, it kind of discuss how they project out.
Okay,
And there's the second paragraph there, it says assuming the 18% for 2013 through 14,
Right.
plus 7.5 after that.
Right, and they received this after because this is based off of this is June 30th, 2013 numbers. So they're factoring it when they go into, because they have to do 2 years out. It is not part of the June 30th, 2013, but it's part of projecting out the 15-16 rates and the 16-17 rates.
We,
Good.
so,
so we know that this is not gonna happen, because we know from public knowledge and our understanding that this rate is one time.
Right.
It's not gonna, I mean, it's.
the
it's-
18%.
Yeah, it's not statistically possible again,
Okay,
because it was a recovery from the financial crisis.
got it.
And I want to comment, I agree with what Jim said, and I saw the survey that I thought was wonderful, the open town hall meeting,
Mhm.
and I saw some of the priorities that citizens have posted. My comment is I've been in enough of the finance committee meetings that we've had a meeting before where we talked about what we do with the money we have on hand and the return that we get on that. And so while I agree with Jim, and I think that the council is working judiciously to decide how to spend money to make improvements that the citizens want, while we wait, I'm not sure if holding on, it's part of your recommendations, I'm not sure if holding on to a lot of cash, if we don't get a good return, and if I'm not sure if from that trade-off perspective, whether it makes sense to make a little bit of go ahead and make a little bit of the payoff, knowing what the town citizens want, because we still need the town council to make the judicious steps. We can't, just because you have the cash, the council's not going to overnight make investments in improvements.
Right.
You need
Yes.
time.
Right. And hopefully we're not gonna spend all of our cash ourselves to make all these investments. We're trying to get grants and, you know, other kind of, grants from the county to help with some of them, so,
What's our rate of return sitting in our bank account, Robert?
2%?
No, and that's the thing, we because of the way the market is, I mean, CalPERS does have a good investment vehicle. I mean, they're getting more investment return than what we're getting, than what any other avenues are out there. I mean, we invest in, we buy corporate bonds, securities, treasury bills, but those rates of return are not nearly what CalPERS does in their investments. I mean, 18.4% is that's amazing. I mean, and right now now they're at 7.5%, but in 2013, it was 12.5%, their rate of return. 2012, it was 1% at fiscal year end. But 2011, it was 20.7%. 2010, it was 11.1%. 2009, it was a negative 23.6%.
Yeah.
2008 was a negative 2.9%. So I mean, they're in the last 4 out of 5 years, they've had double-digit returns. I mean, 18% is just. I mean, 2011 was 20.7%, and then 2 years later, we get 18.4%. You know, their 7.5% is. I mean, it's beating it, right? It's just every year they're gonna analyze it, and it's gonna be incorporated into our rates as they go forward. That's why they kind of put these tools together, like if what happens if it doesn't get 7.5%, and that's on page 19, and I included in the staff report. It kind of shows you how our UAL contribution will change given their changes in the investment rate of return.
If they don't hit it, we wouldn't be affected for 2 years anyway. We say they came off the 18.4 and went to 6. We wouldn't be affected with a 6 setup for 2 years beyond it.
No, and that's why here on this, it shows the closest way it will get affected is the fiscal year 17-18.
So we should be coming up looking at some possible reductions based on the performance 2 years ago and last year.
We will experience some reductions in our normal costs
Yeah,
and
it's a good
in UAL, which is good. You know, if you look at our unfunded liability, it's decreased from previous years. Right now, the total is 9.9 million, our unfunded pension liability. 2.7 of it is miscellaneous. The remaining 9 million is PD. So that's been going down, but it's because of the benefit of, yes, the investment returns, but also too, because of that fact, you know, operationally, yes, the UAL will go down, but do we want to take advantage of that? And just like we did with OPEB, do we want to take advantage and put money aside, whether it's in a reserve or whether to just put money and say, okay, here, CalPERS, here's $2 million, and put it into CalPERS and as a lump sum payment? Or do we want to put it in another vehicle just like we have with PARS? You know, in an investment vehicle where we control the investment, put it in there and let it, you know, have an investment return, and then maybe at the end of 3 years, 4 years, take that money, here CalPERS.
Refresh my
Well, it's
memory on
always-
the PARS return.
It's 6%.
I guess it would depend upon what kind of a dent, you know, that contribution would make in our
Right.
projected payments. And also, the other thing that I've always kind of felt a little uncertain about is we're looking at this 9.9 unfunded liability, but that's based on these actuarials and based on the fact, I could be wrong about this, but that everybody retired at the same time and we had to pay it all out at the same time, and we may not have that. We've got a pretty young workforce at this point. We don't have a lot more coming out, so that number may be actually less than what they're saying that it is. And so I don't ever want to overpay, you know, give them too much to pay it all off. I mean, I think that would be a mistake.
Yeah, I think if we could get more than 6%, I'd actually go along with what you're saying, is put that money somewhere. If we could get that 18.4, hold it aside and draw it down as we need it, of course.
Obviously, is this prepared by the CalPERS?
Yes.
Obviously, they themselves are saying it's impossible because they put 18.9% at 95th percentile.
Yeah.
So they're saying how difficult it is.
Yeah.
And investments are risky. I mean, you know, so.
From an operational perspective, if we are putting the money aside in a trust to then later pay CalPERS, we're kind of double paying. We're going to putting money aside in the trust, and operationally, we're still paying that UAL each month annually in our rates.
Right.
And so we don't have an operational savings, whereas if we contribute it to CalPERS as we go, yeah, they get a better investment return than we're likely to get, and we get an operational savings in our budget, and we'll be able to then adjust other sources of revenue accordingly.
Yeah.
Typically, I understand all that philosophically, I'm opposed to giving my money to somebody else.
Right.
And I would say it's more practical to make, we're gonna keep this building.
high-speed rail, huh?
I would say it would be, my thought is anyway, it would be more sensible to make lump sum payments as the funds are available and after we've taken care of our capital
Right.
requirements for projects, than to go to one of these accelerated, or attempt to go to one of these accelerated payment plans where we're, in theory, would be locking ourselves into larger payments. So we would reap the operational savings by making lump sum payments when we're sitting with too much cash like we probably are right now.
And I think that we should make a policy decision that we don't overfund it. You know, we don't fund up to a certain percentage of it.
Compared to our peers.
I think
Right.
Bob and I are pretty much saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
have no problem making these other payments as long as after we've taken care of the needs of the citizens.
Good, yeah.
Although I think, though, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, pension is different than OPEB. Pension is earned and projected need to pay that employee upon retirement, whereas OPEB is that gap in unfunded actuarial liability. If that employee leaves our organization, that money goes back to us if they don't retire from us. So it's a little different than what you're saying. The money that they're saying is an unfunded actuarial liability is real.
Israel,
That's a real dollar amount that we owe that could grow.
okay.
And another thing too that's gonna come into play is because of these things now, cities are gonna become required to start putting in their balance sheet the net pension liability, which is the self-funded portion.
I thought
So,
we were doing that.
We'll get, and that's
It's
another
a
thing
note
too.
now.
It's an, okay,
Yeah, but it's not a,
it's a footnote.
Yeah.
it's a footnote.
But starting after this fiscal year, we will have to notate what our net pension liability will be. And that's gonna be based off of the time that, that's earned, like the liability that's earned. We're gonna have to calculate that and show that now. So you're looking at some cities we have 9.9 million in liability. Others, because of this, are gonna show probably 40 million in liabilities.
Huge
50
political
million.
impact throughout the state.
Right.
I guarantee
And
it.
so what we wanna do is we're here, we wanna make sure that we put, we take the opportunity, put policies or measures in place to attempt to reduce this. Whether, yes, it could be, maybe every other year or every 2 years, that's what we need to come up with. And yeah, with the investment returns, if continue to be positive and for CalPERS, yes, we'll see the net result on our rates, not only normal cost, but also on our UAL. But at the same time, this, it could grow. It could go from 9.9 million this year to maybe 12 million next year, depending on, what they say, the investment scenario is. Or it could go from 9.9 million to 8 million. And that's where it kind of shows you on that page 19, the analysis of discount rate sensitivity. It shows you on the bottom what would change based on 15-16 employer contribution. They're taking that point in time. So if the discount rate, it shows you the discount rate in the middle of 7.5%. It shows our unfunded accrued liability for miscellaneous is 2.7 million. Now, if it turns out to be, if it was 1% below that, our unfunded liability would go from 2.7 million to 4.5 million. Now, if we take it to the other side, if the discount rate was better than the 7.5%, our unfunded liability improves. It goes from 2.7 million to 1.2 million.
And that happens though, whether or not we're 100% funded or not.
Right.
Okay,
So that's why I think it's problematic, if not impossible, to talk about a percentage of reserve of unfunded liabilities, reducing it to a certain percentage, because it's a moving target. It changes every year based on many things, not just the investment returns, but on all the other things, who quit and who didn't, and who died and who didn't, and whether they changed the.
Well,
Yeah, I totally
you're
agree
absolutely
with that.
right.
No point putting policies in place in a bowl of jello. I mean, it's really got it. We're gonna have this jello next year to look at it and say what's.
But at the same time, I think what's good about this is before it was just a percentage that we were paying. And then, our rates would keep changing and, one year it's 18%, and then all of a sudden it goes to 14%. And then the following year it went from 14% back to 19%. So those rates kept changing. Well, at least with here, you see the UAL, and that's a real number that you'll see every year. Whether, like right here, we assume that.
Yeah, but it's a moving number.
It is a moving number, but if we can see it, whether, if it keeps increasing, and that's what we wanna see. If it keeps increasing, did we put money aside to, it went up to, we thought it was gonna be 405,000, now it's 600,000. Did we put money aside to mitigate that?
So can I make a suggestion maybe? We already have a policy that talks about use of our ERAF, which we've taken out of our operational budget
Right.
line for revenues now. We've said, okay, first line item is unfunded actuarial liabilities, second line item is one-time capital projects, third line item is building the reserves. So you do it in those orders. Without setting a target for pension, we arbitrarily set a target for the OPEB because that's a fluctuating one that we may not actually need to expend. So we set the $5 million mark. That'll be satisfied this year. So then that one will be done. So then we're just focused on pension and workers' comp, which Robert will bring up at some point through the budget process. So if we said, to the extent we have OPEB or ERAF, bring it back every year and consider making a larger than normal contribution to the pension obligation in that given year. To the extent we don't have ERAF, we don't make that pension. Plus, we just do what the minimum required for Calvary.
I think that's sort of what Bob and I were saying, is we look at it as it exists and try not to create a solution for a problem I really don't see exist. We need to look at it each time, is my feeling.
So what, last year we had $1.20 million in ERAF. We made the contribution to OPEB in July, so in this fiscal year, correct?
Correct. We'll be doing and making the same recommendation again this year to contribute
That's
580 or
it's about
680,000 of a $1.1 million
Yeah, I think it was,
Okay.
this year was
or
1.2.
ERAF.
Yeah, and we budgeted 700,000. It came in at 1.2 million URAF. Last year was 1,020,000. But the reason why the 1.2 million came in is because there was a reserve component in ERAF that was a true up. So we received, and that was basically reserved for the last 2 years. The county has to keep that just in case the funding level, the state school funding level changes. So every 2 years now they're gonna refund us whatever that reserve was. So our payment is 1,200,000 this year because of that reserve that was released. Last year was 1,020,000. So this year, since we got the 1.2 million, 600,000 we're going to recommend of that 1.2 million to go to OPEB.
And that'll bring us to.
To 5 million in the trust, which is amazing because we started that back in fiscal year 12, and so we've got to 5 million, and so that's earning interest and stuff. Of the remaining amount, an option will be to bring that to council, maybe put the remaining amount as a portion towards our workers' comp equity. We have a negative equity that we're currently getting billed for that, and maybe taking that portion, catching it up, and then we'll save some operational costs that way.
About 100,000 a year.
Right.
what do you have to deposit to do that?
Right now, I think it's about 521,000, and our workers' comp is negative equity, so we're in the negative. So what they want to do is continue. We've been paying.
That's another actuarial moving target.
Right, because you don't know how many workers' comp you're going to have or what. But in previous years, the town paid. The JPA allowed the town to get billed that 5 year, the negative gap. They've added on to their invoice every year. So without that, our workers' comp would be about 120,000. Right now, it's about 220,000 because they added that assessment. So the assessment was supposed to go away this year, but we didn't. We fixed the past problem, but as we were fixing the past, the current claims kept going up, and so now we're back at the same level of paying that continued 220,000. So
you need to improve your health and welfare programs.
Well, yeah, but I can tell you why there's workman's comp claims.
Everybody knows why,
right? But so instead of getting away from that and lowering that operational cost, it's going to continue. So one approach is, okay, instead of continue paying that every year, let's wipe off that negative equity and go start over fresh. Rather than, if not, then we'll continue to pay that for another 5 years.
I still want to understand, if you're dealing with an insurance company and they do a negative loss pick and say that you're 500 grand in the hole, and you give them the 500 grand, you never get it back.
No, that 500 grand catches us up because we're basically.
I know, but if the loss pick changes and improves in subsequent years, does the 500,000 is sitting there as a surplus?
No, because it brings us back to zero.
Why do we have to pay? What's the interest? Are they charging us interest on the unfunded amount? Negative equity?
No,
So it's
just
an interest-free.
Yeah, it's interest-free and it's over 5 years.
Free money.
It doesn't. I don't understand why they want us to pay it.
No, they don't want us to pay
It's
it.
OPM.
One thing is we could pay it up front, or the JPA allows us to be charged that amount over 5 years, right, to clear it up. But we're hoping that within that 5 years, that our workman's claim increase gets better, right?
Right.
So what if it doesn't over the 5 years? It doesn't, and instead of it being 200,000 that we're paying, now it's going to jump up to 300,000. Because we were taking 5 years to pay off what we owed, right?
But if interest isn't accruing, then
No.
why
But
the rush?
It's an operational cost.
operational costs, we could save.
We have a
100,000.
set amount of revenues against a set amount of expenditures. If we can reduce the expenditures, then we've got a operational savings we can then allocate to other projects.
I see that as you're paying another worst-case scenario on a future event that's unknown.
These are
So
past events.
these are what we
No,
owe.
just the money we owe, but we don't, you're saying it could get worse, the claims ratio can get worse. Again, they're not dinging us for it, we owe it, why do we wanna give them our money, to particularly insurance company?
Well,
Again, it's the same thing
I
I said
guess he
before.
I
wants
need
the
to know.
balance
This
sheet
is
to look
an
better.
area I know a little bit about, because
Yeah.
we formed our own insurance company with a bunch of other guys in the same business, and I ran that insurance company and was on the board for a long time and ran it for a while. So I know a little bit about loss picks and loss funding and all that stuff. I'd have to know a little bit more about how your JPA handles all this, because the loss pick changes year to year. The actuaries that they use will change the loss pick every year, and so
Basically, what happened is other cities, because we got billed a certain amount, other cities basically picked up what we owed. Basically.
to pay current claims. I can see how they would run it that way.
And so that's how it works. It's because of the JPA, we're pulling money. We're paying every city set up separately within this JPA. So you know what's your claim, so out of all the JPA, Atherton is the one that has the worst negative equity.
So if it's 100% on claims paid basis, then then I can kind of,
That we do.
that
owe it.
debt's not gonna go away.
Yeah, we
Right.
do owe it.
If it's on claims paid basis.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
Okay,
And so it'll continue.
I'd wanna verify that, but.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right,
was
I
this
think we should-
over a period of time, or was this something that just kind of came
This
up?
happened just the last couple of years. I mean, the last couple of years, as far as we were paying off
I remember that.
the claim,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, we had 5 years to pay it off, so this was the last year to pay it off. But we got to the point where, as we were paying off that claim, or the previous claims, more claims just happened in the last couple of years.
Mm.
And not just one, but
Beyond the-
multiple.
Beyond the last couple of years.
Right.
Right.
What are these medical injuries?
Workman's
Yeah.
comp.
Workers' comp stuff, issues.
We had a couple
claims.
of police officers that were rear-ended by, in a traffic incident, they were rear-ended, so they left on workers' comp claims, disability claims, those sorts of claims.
Yeah, and then all that has a cumulative effect because they're out on workman's comp claims. We still have to operate and staff, so it builds up. So, you know, that's why this workers' comp negative equities is a potential bringing it to council. Hey, let's tackle this issue, maybe alleviate some expenditure
But that's something
cost.
that,
That will-
you know, the expertise that Bob's got here can certainly come into play.
Yeah, I think we
We'll
need
bring it up at the next
More
meeting.
a lot more
information.
information before
Yeah.
talking about work,
Yeah.
I mean, particularly when we got a foremost
But-
expert here.
But I think our position as a group, if I've heard everybody correctly, including staff, that we're treating the ERAF as a below-the-line item, kind of free money, doesn't affect our operational budget. If our capital projects appear to be fully funded, and all of our, and our general fund is in good shape, to utilize those ERAF funds on an annual basis to pay down OPEB to the level we've decided to get it to pay down pension liabilities, to pay down what I would want to verify our firm liabilities regarding our workers' comp experience, that would be the proper direction to go for the council.
And all of those things affect our operational budget.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the more we can reduce our operational costs, the better.
And that creates more, is the word profit applicable for a town?
Sort of.
General fund
General
reserves.
fund reserves.
Our net fund balance.
Net fund balance.
You want a positive net fund
Which
balance.
will add additional spotlight on the sources of revenue and our fiscal measures and what we should do about that too.
Correct.
And then also last time we had the lady Paula Cohn
Yeah.
tell us about the property tax roll.
Yeah, because it's
Children
going up,
in
but it's
water.
gonna
Eventually,
level
I
off
think
It's
it'll
gonna flatten out.
Yeah.
because of the
Well,
recapture.
a recapture and then building, there's only so much, you know, land here that the town has. Once it's
Well,
developed,
Yeah, but you
There's
know,
a
some
lot
of
of
those new
houses to flip
houses
yet.
are.
There's a lot
A
of,
lot of houses to flip yet.
some good dirt in this town, let me tell you.
well, I mean, you're right, and we benefited for that. You know, we've increased 26% in assessed value the last 3 years combined, which is good. And so, we're just taking the measures because that's part of what council's direction is, you know, understand our liabilities, continue fiscal stability, and this is part of it. This is paying down our pension liabilities, our OPEB liabilities, and then freeing up money for capital improvement projects. So that's all part of the grand plan of fiscal stability. And you've seen in our general fund, we've had a healthy reserve, but that wasn't the case a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's different now, I
Right.
mean, sometimes a little fuel aggravation, but I totally agree with what Bob said is the way to go.
So are we limiting our opinion, I guess you'd call it, to ERAF, or are we discussing excess general fund? Excess is the wrong term. Unassigned general fund balances, which,
I mean, that's an option as well.
I would support we stick with the ERAF until we get a picture of what's going on, because, as you said, that's below the line money. No.
I kind of feel we can't go wrong there
Right.
unless, we're running operational deficits, which we're not.
That changes the.
Or unless we have unfunded capital projects, which I don't think we do, although you guys are spending money like drunken sailors, so.
That's what Bob wants us to do.
Jim,
sorry.
yeah.
Where are we on that?
And I want you to
Are we-
brag about it to the
We really
residents too. I
haven't
want it
been
on
spending
the
any
website.
money.
We just completed this
The
project in town,
capital
that project
improvements,
in
not
town.
just yet.
So
We've
people know
increased,
that they'll get some value for
Yeah.
the
funding for
taxes.
the park maintenance.
So
We,
we're good.
did, $75,000 for drainage, right? The 50 and the 25,000
For the park.
for the park.
We're repainting all the buildings in the park and putting in a catering kitchen in the pavilion.
Yeah, catering
And I'll bet
kitchen
you
and
if I
Jim's
ask 5
pavilion.
of my neighbors, none of them will know that. I might even
Well,
take their
it's
kids to the
in
park.
reports,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
People don't read the reports, we need more, what am I saying? Is we need more publicity on this stuff. We're doing a good job
good
of
stuff.
stuff, but again, the residents need to know that and need to see that. I
Yeah.
remember Diana said the same thing when she was running for council. Everybody thinks they don't know where the money goes.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you gotta show the people where the money goes.
Well,
It was in my answer, for sure.
listen, and we have the open, the budget,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
all
Well, if-
online.
Again, if people read them,
I know,
that's the
well,
issue.
we could
There's
hold,
a limited
neighborhood
subset.
meetings.
I think, but I think that's a good idea, it's point well taken. Maybe once a year, I suggested
Recap.
to the mayor that we have an annual town hall meeting where he gives or she gives a state of the city address. We talk about the budget and we hold it at the park and we do a tour of what's been done.
Or just something on
So-
your website and say, hey, we just completed a brand new kitchen in the Park Park, and it should generate more revenue for the town, just quick money, send us.
Building bleachers.
Right.
All this information.
You know, it's gonna be gone, out in our Athertonian,
Yeah.
we put it out in the Athertonian, and which is coming out, it's gonna be mailed next week?
You might know more than me.
Okay, yeah.
That's
The
something
new
you gotta do.
Athertonian, mm-hmm.
You say toot your own horn if you're doing it right.
So I guess,
Just get enough grief coming at you.
I know.
so I guess then as far as considering developing analysis, I guess it's a consensus that, we have the ERAF that every year bring back, potential discussion for contributing ERAF money towards.
Unfunded liabilities. Are we done with this topic for the time being?
So moved.
Yes.
And the next item on the agenda is to talk about where our meeting dates are gonna be, and then we're done.
Yeah, I have a potential meeting date for May 12th.
But the one before that, Rob,
Oh, yeah.
is the,
Discuss and set finance meetings.
the councils,
Yeah.
the city council and the committee governance resolution. We put a provision in there that each committee shall annually set a calendar of meetings we can put on the website so we can fill these seats so people know when the meetings are. So we're asking each committee to do that. So for this committee, we're hoping you can do that from now until June, and then July 1st, do one for the next fiscal year.
Well, my planning horizon runs maximum of a month, so I know I can do the 12th of May, and after that, if you want to pick the first or second Tuesday of every other month,
Okay,
we've,
we'll do that.
if we have to move something, we have to move something.
I'm gonna be back in Washington on the 12th of May. I'll be back a week later.
And I can't do it a week later.
Okay.
Or, the 12th, or maybe the 5th.
First week of May, I believe would be fine for me.
I don't care when you anyway. I can make it work, so.
I mean, if for Mr. Anthony, can you make the 5th if we adjusted it
What?
for that? Could you make May 5th?
Yeah, May 5th is good.
I mean, we can make it,
No, that's
that'll
fine.
be the first Tuesday of the month, but our standing meetings
Will be
will be
the
the second
second Tuesday,
Tuesday every
yes.
other month.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I'll do is I'll create a calendar of our meetings so that, we can probably adopt it for the July meeting. And that way you can see, I'll put a tentative calendar, I'll bring it at the main meeting, you can see it, and then we can adopt it
Yeah.
in July for the remainder, for the next fiscal year.
Okay.
Okay, so May 5th will be our next meeting.
So do we just take care of 5 and 6 both on my agenda here?
Yes.
Then I guess I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor? Aye. We're done.
Nice meeting.